Harlan Decker had found God. Not the undying God Emperor of mankind, or the primordial moose lots of the city folk worshipped on the sly, but the one true God that spun and flowed between all the worlds like Starblood, the God of water and wheels. Praise the wheels that win forever, Decker crooned as he walked the rusted iron gantries of his kingdom. They corkscrewed along the walls of the cavernous multi-leveled chamber, encircling the vast water wheel whirling at its center. Fully half the wheel was submerged in the frothing river far below. Colossal gear and pistons framed it, venting steam as they spun and pounded in time with its rotation. Hail the waters that oil the holy spokes and keep the works running slick and smooth, Decker sang. What spins around comes around. His words were lost in the roar of rushing water and machinery, but that didn't matter. His God would hear them anyhow. Decker had come up with a prayer himself, though nobody ever figured him for a man of words, never mind the preacher. Nobody ever figured him for much at all, really. Born and bred in the churn, he'd been tending to the great wheel poking out of the city's arse since he was a boy. Just another meat cog among thousands who kept things running so the fancy folk upstairs had light and power. They don't even know we're here, he thought jovially. But they're gonna. Most of his fellow wheel monkeys reckoned they had it pretty good down in the churn, even with the freezing damp and the endless racket. The shiners looked after everybody, didn't they? There was always plenty and tasty to eat and drink, bunk, waiting in shifts, and, along with enough fun and games between stints to keep a working man lively. And somewhere down the road, when his body was worn to the bone and he had gone stone deaf, the promise of a comfy life in the overchurn with all the trimmings of paradise thrown in. Maybe even a chance to meet a shiner. Ain't like the hives, boys. Chief Silva was always fond of saying, leastwise he was before Decker fixed him. The shiners do right by us. The wheel monkeys would all nod at that, looking dead serious, like they knew what the hives even was. Decker had nodded along with the rest of them, cause it wasn't sharp to stand out if you weren't in it with Silva. He was a stand-up worker who knew the ropes, but he wasn't in with anyone except maybe old Mackerel, who was funny in the head. Fact was, he'd been working the wheel near on 50 years and had inclined past grunt work. The bastards had passed him over for shift chief every bloody time. Decker reckoned they could smell the special on him even before he found God and showed him who the man with the real power was down here. Bless you all good and proper, he thought, grinning. Decker's God didn't have a name or a face regular folks could see, but it had a creed and its way of worship. A man just needed the brains to listen. He'd first started hearing the holy word a few months back, whenever he was cleaning the wheel spokes. It was real dangerous work because the spinning never let up. A man had to hold his pole brush just right or he was liable to get yanked into the waterworks and chewed up into fish food, like that dumb clunker Pewley did last year. But not Harlan Decker. No sir, old Harlan lived and breathed the rhythm of the wheel like it was part of him. Maybe that's why he'd heard the tune in his rackets when nobody else could. It had been quiet at first, but the more he listened, the sharper it got, until he was humming right along with it. Then someone had ratted him out as a drainhead, and Chief Silva tried bumping him down to Seasbridge, where dregs like mackerels scrapped a living, shoveling shit and scouring the sewers clean. No room for dreamers on the wheel, Silva had mocked, cranking a grin cause he'd always had it in for Decker. Makes the other boys jumpy, see? That's when Decker's God first showed up inside him, bubbling up from his guts like holy puke or maybe firewater, cause it made him feel just dandy. He shredded when the spray burst out of his mouth, steaming and glowing, all kinds of color he'd never seen before. Silva didn't burn when the stuff drenched him, but it sure melted, squealing and lashing about as his bones turned to jelly. Decker had laughed at first, but then he got serious, cause his God was watching. He'd seen the shape he wanted, like a pict in his head, and that's what the wheel gave him, plucking and kneading Silva into something that fit the bastard better. A fat slug with arms everywhere, all long, bendy and bushy with suckers, like the merc squids that clung to the wheel. But Decker kept Silva's tattooed mug in the mix, all sunken and spilled out over his back, just so everyone would remember the lousy dredger. After the change was done, Decker realized he'd made the wheel monkey the way they was meant to be. Something built to work and worship the wheel like no man ever could. It could stick to the spokes and clean him as it slithered around with no worries about falling or drowning. He'd done a miracle. That was when Harlan Decker knew for sure he'd been chosen. Silva had been his first offering, a sacrifice and a sign-up to the Creed in one. But there were plenty more after that, all picked from the dreggers who'd crossed Decker in the past or might make trouble now. But he was a fair boss. He went easy on folks who fell in line with the new way of things, a few changes here and there, just so they was marked and knew their place, but nothing too heavy. Besides, he wasn't ready to take on the shiners yet, so it paid to keep up a front for the folks upstairs. Let him think nothing had changed in the churn till it was too late. He'd been mulling over spreading the word further afield, maybe bring in some of the folks who work the crops outside the walls. Maybe even Decker halted as the thunder of gunfire tore through the familiar clamor of the wheel. Screams echoed down from the chamber's heights. Looking up, he saw bright flashes sparking along the gloomy gantries. Muzzle flare. He'd seen it in action vidcast, but never for real. That ain't right, he muttered, frowning. A body plummeted through the tangle of walkways and crashed down next to him. Smoke poured from the massive hole in the worker's torso. More bodies rained down, most stumbling into the wheel or waters below. They've come for us, Decker realized, stunted. They've come for me.